Once you were old enough, what were the dark family secrets you were finally let in on? My uncle is believed to have murdered 2 Australian police officers in the late 80s. Holy speep. Walsh Street. Yep. Peter McEvoy. I was never told much, but when I was about 15 my grandmother started getting dementia and had a breakdown. All I could understand was that she kept repeating "we are traitors." I know she was sent to some sort of children's camp during World War II to be away from the fighting. I think it was called Kinderland. I believe she never saw her parents again, and it took decades to find her sister. I will have to ask my aunt one day. Maybe she can tell me more. You should look into it. It sounds like your great-grandparents might have been resistance fighters who were captured by the Nazis, and their children taken away to be re-educated. If true, that's a family legacy to be proud of. That my favorite cousin wasn't missing. All I knew growing up, he was 13 years older than me, was that he would come and go at. He lived with us when I was a baby, and after he moved out he would visit every 6 months or so out of the blue. But we never visited him or called him. His visits were one of my favorite things in the world. I loved him like a brother. By the time I was a teenager I did understand that he had issues with his parents. They had kicked him out at 13 and my parents took him in. But that kind of childhood messes with you. In between visits to my parents he avoided the rest of the family, moved out, and didn't hold jobs for long. Which is why my parents didn't always know where he was. But in my later teens he stopped coming over at all. I asked repeatedly if anyone had heard from him, and I was told no. I asked about contacting him, and was told no one had a number or address for him. He would come around when he felt like it. But it stretched on 4 years. I really worried he was dead, and I really missed him. In my later 20s I finally found out that everyone knew where he was the whole time. He was in prison for murder. From what I hear it was actually somewhat justified. He was defending his new wife, who I never got to meet. I also found out some super speepy things about how the extended family sided with his peeped up parents and refused to help him or his wife when he got arrested. And that they shamed my dad into not helping either. I tried to send a message to him in prison, but I don't know if he ever got it. I wish he knew that I didn't turn my back on him for decades like everyone else did. I just didn't know. You could probably request a visit with him and visit. He could deny it, but it would be worth a try if you would like to see him. My cousins used to stay with us a lot. I remember my male cousin was just a small baby when he first came to us. He would scream and scream and scream all night, and mum put him in my room. So I used to spend the night cuddling him or playing peekaboo. My other cousin was my age 5 at the time. I found out later. My auntie was a heroin addict and a peep worker. My cousins were the result of clients and my male cousin was actually born whilst my auntie was heavily using and he was going through withdrawal after his birth. My grandparents ended up flying him from Wales and taking custody of them as well as putting my auntie on a plane and leaving with all of them. It was one of the saddest days of my life that I never understood. I thought they were going to be my brother and sister and wasn't sure why all of a sudden they were taken from me. So sad to read this. How are they doing now? My male cousin is doing super well. We are still very close. He came to my wedding last year in Australia. My female cousin unfortunately has succumbed to a similar lifestyle as my auntie and has disconnected herself from the family. I think she went through some pretty heinous stuff when she was being bounced around through foster homes before us, so she's got a lot of darkness. Not so much letting on, as we found out by accident, but apparently my dad's first love and him got into a serious car crash when he was 25 and she died. He lived with her father 4 years after her death. He still occasionally comes to visit my dad, even 30 years later. We were always told he was a mentor, until my sister pressed my mom on the subject. One of my sisters is even named after the girl that died middle name, and we never even knew about her until last year. None of us have ever brought it up with him. My friend was engaged to his first love in their early 20s when she passed from cancer. 10 years later, He got married to an amazing woman who honored his late fiancé in their wedding ceremony. Not a dry eye in the place. Oh man, that's awesome and heartbreaking all in one. To put it shortly, my family tree is more like a very long branch. Yes, we have the genetic defects to prove it. That's not uncommon where I'm from. Hundreds of tiny isolated rural communities with little easy access led to a lot of accidental inbreeding. World-class geneticists flock to my province to study all the weird speep that pops up. It's gotten to the point that people in other nations have found out their family was from here when they get a disorder or defect that was only present in this one family from this certain bay. That's really interesting. I won't ask for an example disorder since that might reveal your location, but it's interesting there's such highly unique mutations in humans. That my grandpa molested all the women in our family, not just me. And they let it happen, because that's just what you do. When my grandfather molested me young adult at the time, my grandmother literally got down on her knees and begged me not to tell, because it would bring shame to the family. Sorry, Gram. He brought shame to the family with his actions. It's not my duty to protect him or your reputation. That's terrible. What happened afterwards? Did you say something? The reason I had a live-in babysitter when I was 5 that moved in at 2 AM was because my mom's cousin killed 2 kids and we ended up harboring his daughter during the trial. He's the only person on death row in my county. What happened to her after? My brother swears she stole my mom's jewelry and ran off. Mom says she didn't. But I'm pretty sure she's in town with kids of her own. My grandmother's first husband was extremely abusive. But this was the 60s, and he hid it well. She couldn't file for divorce without proof of injury, so she beat herself in the face with a slipper to get away. She was 21 or 22 or so with 3 young children. I'm 23 right now, and I could never imagine. She was such a strong lady. I miss her. 3. That my cousin was actually my half-brother. Mom got pregnant in college and my aunt and uncle adopted him. And that my dad wasn't my biological father. Mom and dad got divorced. She got pregnant by another man. And my dad wasn't able to have kids of his own. So they got remarried and he raised me as his own. There are 2 posts here about a cousin that is also a half brother. And if you put the 2 together, what do you get? A full brother. My step-grandfather has always been an alcoholic. As a child he even taught me how to mix his favorite drink. As kid at like 6 years old I would mix his drink as he liked and bring it into him in the living room. Don't ask what the drink was a mix of cause I literally can't remember, and my grandpa always acted funny. I always liked spending time with him cause I found him funny. So I never saw the bad side of his alcoholism and he never made me drink or anything, so overall he didn't have any negative impact on me at all. But before I was born he could get so drunk he threatened to kill my grandma, and when he got in a car accident and came home he was bleeding badly from his head, and he started saying my granny shot him. He even threw out some of the wedding pictures my parents had. I never knew how horrible he was. Maybe cause he liked kids or something. He would make me cocoa and watch Garfield with me when I was a kid. He was never a bad influence in my life. So it was so weird to me when I found out these things about him. Before he died though, he really regretted drinking, and he completely stopped. He became really depressed too until his granddaughter biological was born. He was so happy about his granddaughter. He died regretting everything, and a sober man who was happy to have been able to meet his one and only biological granddaughter. Regardless of everything he really changed in the end and everyone was really upset he died. Most my mom's family were aging drunks. She was a very late oopsie baby so almost all her siblings were grown once she came around, and she spent a lot of time bouncing between siblings, parents, or other relatives. Her older brothers got her drunk at age 5 and laughed while she puked all over herself. She learned to drive around 10 because her brother would get sleep-faced and she'd have to drive him home. And there was also pretty severe medical neglect. She's never gotten therapy and was a real treat to be raised by. Intergenerational trauma. The gift that keeps on giving.